The crystalline spires of Vel'Thara pierced the violet sky like shards of frozen light, and Dr. Elena Morrison felt her breath catch as the transport descended. She had studied alien biology for 15 years, but nothing prepared her for the reality of standing on a world where every surface refracted starlight into dancing rainbows. The Vel'Kari had invited her here to document their culture, or so the official transmission had claimed. The truth, she would soon learn, was far more desperate. The reception committee waited at the landing platform, their chitinous bodies gleaming like polished obsidian. The Vel'Kari stood upright on 4 legs, with 2 additional limbs that served as arms, and multifaceted eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. The lead diplomat, who introduced himself as Keeper Varn, gestured with one graceful limb toward the palace complex. "Dr. Morrison, we apologize for the deception," Varn said, his voice produced by vibrating thoracic plates that her translator rendered into perfect English. "Your expertise is needed for a matter of survival, not scholarship." Elena's stomach tightened. "What kind of survival? Our queen is dying, and she has produced no heir." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena knew enough about eusocial species to understand the implications. Without a queen, without the next generation of royal genetics, the entire civilization would collapse within decades. The workers would grow old, the soldiers would fall in battle unreplaced, and the Vel'Kari would simply cease to exist. They led her through corridors that seemed grown rather than built, organic curves of crystalline material that hummed with bioluminescent light. The deeper they went, the more the palace felt alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of an entire species. Finally, they reached a chamber so vast that Elena couldn't see the ceiling. At its center, resting on a platform of woven precious metals, lay the queen. She was massive, easily 3 times the size of her subjects, her carapace dulled with age and etched with patterns that told the story of centuries. But what struck Elena most was the queen's eyes, fixed on her with an intelligence that transcended species. In those faceted depths, she saw fear, hope, and something that looked remarkably like determination. "Approach, human," the queen said, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. "They tell me you understand the science of life itself." Elena stepped forward, her scientific training warring with the urge to kneel. "Your Majesty, I'm a geneticist and xenobiologist. I study how life adapts and survives, but I don't know if I can help with reproductive failure in a species I've only just met." "Then learn quickly," the queen replied. "My body produces eggs, but they die before they quicken. My physicians cannot explain why. Our greatest minds have failed. You are our final hope, Dr. Morrison. Will you try?" Elena met those alien eyes and saw a mother's desperation. "I'll try." The next 3 days blurred into a frenzy of research. The Vel'Kari gave Elena access to their entire medical archive, genetic databases spanning 10,000 years, and the Queen's own biological samples. What she discovered made her blood run cold. The Vel'Kari weren't just facing reproductive failure. They were experiencing genetic collapse. Somewhere in their distant past, a population bottleneck had devastated their genetic diversity. The royal line, essential for producing viable queens, had been inbreeding for millennia. Each generation, the DNA degraded further. The current queen's eggs contained so many lethal mutations that they couldn't survive past the first cell divisions. Elena stood in the research chamber, holographic displays of Vel'Kari chromosomes floating around her like accusing ghosts. Keeper Varn entered, his posture radiating anxiety. "Have you found an answer?" he asked. "I've found the problem," Elena said carefully. "Your species has been slowly strangling itself genetically. The royal line is too pure, too isolated. In Earth terms, you've been breeding champions to champions until the bloodline became fragile." Varn's antenna drooped. "This is known. Our historians speak of the Great Choosing, when our ancestors decided that only the purest queens should rule. They eliminated genetic diversity in the name of perfection. They doomed you," Elena said bluntly. "But there might be a way to fix it." She pulled up her own research files. Years of work on human stem cells and genetic repair. My species discovered techniques to rewrite DNA, to repair mutations, to reactivate dormant genes. If I could apply those techniques to Vel'Kari biology, I might be able to restore the Queen's reproductive capacity. You would alter our Queen's sacred essence? Varn's voice carried a note of horror. I would save her life and your species, Elena shot back. But yes, it would require changing her DNA at a fundamental level. I can't do this without consent from both the Queen and your High Council. The debate that followed nearly tore the Vel'Kari leadership apart. Half the council viewed Elena's proposal as salvation. The other half saw it as desecration, a human corrupting the sacred royal bloodline. The arguments raged for hours, voices rising in clicks and chimes that her translator could barely keep up with. Finally, the Queen herself intervened, her weakened voice cutting through the chaos. I am dying. Our people are dying. If this human can give us a future, then we accept change, or we accept death. I choose life. The vote passed by a single council member. Elena worked in the royal medical chamber, surrounded by Vel'Kari physicians who watched her every move with suspicion and hope. She had to modify her techniques, adapting human cellular technology to an entirely alien biochemistry, where human cells use DNA packaged in a double helix. Vel'Kari genetics operated on a triple-strand system with base pairs she'd never encountered. It was like trying to repair a car engine when you'd only ever worked on aircraft. The first attempt failed within minutes. The modified egg collapsed, its cellular structure unable to handle the genetic changes. Elena made adjustments and tried again. The second egg lasted an hour before dying. The third made it to day 2. You're killing her faster, accused Councillor Tex, the leader of the traditionalist faction. Each failure drains Her Majesty's remaining strength. Elena's hands shook as she prepared the 4th attempt. Then I'd better succeed soon. She changed her approach. Instead of trying to rewrite the Vel'Kari genetic code with human techniques, she started looking for what was already there. She dove into the ancient texts, searching for clues about how Vel'Kari reproduction had functioned before the genetic bottleneck. In a crumbling archive dating back 8,000 years, she found it. A reference to queens who could produce multiple egg types, who mated with diverse genetic partners, whose offspring showed variations in color and size. The ancient Vel'Kari had been genetically diverse. The modern ones had locked away those pathways in the name of purity. Elena didn't need to replace their genetics. She needed to unlock them. Working through the night, she designed a treatment using human stem cell differentiation signals as keys to reactivate dormant Vel'Kari genes. It was elegant. It was risky, and it was their last chance. The Queen was fading, her carapace growing brittle, her movements sluggish. This is it, Elena told her. If this doesn't work, I have no other options. The Queen's eyes glittered with fierce intelligence. Then let us see if a human can teach an old queen new tricks. Elena administered the treatment, watching as the modified cellular signals spread through the Queen's reproductive system. For 3 agonizing days, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th morning, the sensors registered something Elena had never seen in any of the previous scans. The Queen's body was producing eggs, healthy, viable eggs. The entire palace erupted in celebration. Vel'Kari workers danced in the corridors, their joy expressed in a symphony of clicks and chimes. The council members who had supported Elena preened with vindication. Even Councillor Thex seemed moved, his rigid posture softening as he witnessed the Queen's revival. But the celebration was short-lived. Elena was in her quarters analyzing the genetic profiles of the new eggs when the alarms began to wail. She rushed into the corridor to find it filled with armed Vel'Kari soldiers, their carapaces painted with insignias she didn't recognize. Keeper Varn appeared, pulling her into a side passage. Quickly! Councillor Tex has declared the eggs contaminated by human influence. He's attempting a coup. That's insane, Elena gasped. The eggs are genetically pure Vel'Kari. I only activated what was already there. He doesn't care about truth. He cares about power. Varn's antennae flattened against his head in a gesture of fear. He's convinced 1/3 of the military that you've corrupted the royal line. They're moving to destroy the eggs and execute the Queen. Elena's scientific mind raced ahead of her fear. The eggs, where are they? In the royal hatching chamber with Her Majesty. But the chamber is under siege. Then we get her out. Now. They navigated through hidden passages Elena hadn't known existed. Service tunnels used by workers to move unseen through the palace. How it could have slipped outside of our perimeters, Varn explained as they ran. The Vel'Kari had a long history of succession wars, but nothing like this. Never before had anyone questioned the sanctity of the queen's eggs. They emerged in a small antechamber adjacent to the royal hatching room. Through the translucent walls, Elena could see the queen, surrounded by a defensive circle of loyal soldiers, with the precious eggs arrayed behind her on heated pedestals. Beyond them, Thex's forces were assembling, weapons charged and ready. "We need to evacuate her," Elena said. "Impossible," Varn replied. "The queen cannot abandon her eggs. It would violate every instinct she possesses. Then we evacuate them together." Elena had studied the Vel'Kari palace layout obsessively during her research. She knew there was a subterranean transport system, built centuries ago for moving valuable materials. If they could reach it, they could get the queen and her eggs to safety. She explained the plan to Varn, who looked at her with something approaching awe. "You would risk your life for our queen?" "She's a mother protecting her children," Elena said simply. "That transcends species." The evacuation was a nightmare of precision and speed. Elena convinced the Queen's guards to create a diversion, drawing Thex's forces toward the main entrance while a small team carried the eggs through the back passages. The Queen herself moved with surprising agility for her size, maternal instinct overriding her weakened state. They were halfway to the transport tunnels when Thex's assassins found them. The attack came from above. Rebels dropping from ventilation shafts with weapons blazing. Loyal soldiers fell, their carapaces shattered by energy bolts. Elena grabbed the nearest egg container and ran, the Queen's massive form shielding her from behind. "Keep moving," the Queen commanded. "The eggs must survive." They burst into the transport station, a cavernous space filled with ancient machinery. Elena's hands flew over the control panel, activating systems that hadn't been used in decades. Behind them, the sounds of battle echoed closer. "It's not working," she muttered, then switched to manual override. The transport car shuddered to life, its engines whining in protest. "Everyone in!" Varn shouted. They piled into the car, eggs and queen and guards and one desperate human scientist. The doors began to close just as Thex himself appeared at the entrance, flanked by a dozen armed rebels. "Stop," he commanded. "Those eggs are abominations. They will corrupt our entire species." The Queen turned to face him, and in that moment, Elena saw the full weight of her royal authority. "These eggs are hope, Counselor. And you're a coward who fears change more than death." The doors sealed. The transport launched into the tunnels, racing through the underground network while battle raged above. They emerged miles from the palace, in a worker district whose residents stared in shock at the sight of their queen arriving in an ancient cargo car. The local administrator, a worker named Kessa, offered her facility a sanctuary. They set up the eggs in a climate-controlled storage room, hastily modified to serve as a hatching chamber. The Queen settled in, exhausted but determined, her body curved protectively around her offspring. Elena checked the eggs constantly, monitoring their development. They were progressing normally, better than normal actually. The genetic reactivation had given them robustness that modern Vel'Kari eggs hadn't shown in generations. News of the Queen's escape spread through the worker districts like wildfire. Support rallied around her. Common Vel'Kari who saw hope in those eggs. But Thex controlled the military and the upper palace. The species teetered on the brink of civil war. On the third day of their exile, the first egg began to hatch. Elena had never witnessed a Vel'Kari birth. No outsider had. But the Queen invited her to stay, to see the result of her work. The egg cracked along predetermined seams, and a tiny form emerged, wet and trembling. The princess was beautiful. Her carapace gleamed with colors Elena had only seen in ancient artwork, deep purples and blues that modern Vel'Kari had lost. She was small, fragile, but her eyes held that same fierce intelligence Elena had seen in her mother. "Scan her," the queen said softly. "Show them the truth." Elena's hands shook as she ran the genetic analyzer. The results appeared on her datapad, clear and irrefutable. The princess was 100% Vel'Kari. Every chromosome, every gene was pure. No human DNA, no contamination. Just ancient Vel'Kari genetics, awakened from their long sleep. Keeper Varn transmitted the results across every communication channel on the planet. Within hours, Thex's support began to crumble. Soldiers deserted his cause. Council members who had sided with him issued public apologies. The proof was undeniable. Elena hadn't corrupted the royal line. She had saved it. Thex made one final desperate assault on the worker district, leading his remaining loyalists in a direct attack. But the Vel'Kari people had made their choice. Workers and soldiers who had once stayed neutral now stood with their queen. The battle was brief and decisive. When Thex was brought before the queen, he refused to meet her eyes. "I believed I was protecting our heritage," he said quietly. "You were protecting your fear," the queen replied, "and fear is a poor guardian of anything." She banished him to the outer territories, a mercy that surprised many. But as she explained to Elena later, their species needed healing, not more bloodshed. Over the following weeks, the remaining eggs hatched, each princess healthy and genetically diverse. The queen's body, freed from the burden of genetic decay, grew stronger. She began producing eggs at a rate not seen in living memory, ensuring the Vel'Kari would have a future. The ceremony took place in the reconstructed royal chamber with representatives from every district in attendance. The queen, radiant in her renewed health, addressed her people. Elena Morrison came to us as an outsider, a human studying strange insects. She leaves us as family. The queen gestured, and Elena stepped forward, her heart pounding. "By the ancient right of royal adoption, I name her Princess Elena of House Vel'Thara, honored mother of our renewed line." The title came with a genetic marker, a small modification that would allow Vel'Kari pheromone sensors to recognize Elena as royalty. It was symbolic, but the symbolism mattered. Elena wasn't just an ally, she was one of them. As the ceremony concluded and the celebration began, Elena stood on a balcony overlooking the crystalline city. Varn joined her, his posture relaxed in a way she'd never seen. "You changed us," he said. "Not just our genetics, but our understanding of what it means to be Vel'Kari." Elena smiled. "I just reminded you of what you already were. A species strong enough to survive, adaptable enough to change, and wise enough to accept help." Below them, Vel'Kari workers danced in the streets, and in the royal chamber young princesses explored their new world with curious antennae and bright, intelligent eyes. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but alive with possibility. Elena had come to Vel'Thara as a scientist seeking knowledge. She left as something far more important. Proof that different species could not just coexist, but strengthen each other. Not through conquest or domination, but through compassion, courage, and the simple human conviction that every life worth living was worth saving. The crystalline spires caught the setting sun, refracting light across a world reborn. And Elena Morrison, human xenobiologist and Vel'Kari princess, watched hope bloom in colors both species could finally see together.